So welcome to session 3, and this is our first panel discussion for the day, and it's templates in Archicad. And for those that have followed me throughout the years, you'd probably understand how passionate I am about templates and how much I believe personally that it's actually the fundamental foundation to a practice succeeding in their implementation and use of Archicad within their practice. Now today, it's not just me, it's not just my personal views about templates. What I've done is I've assembled a team of Archicad experts from across the globe, mainly in Australia and Hong Kong, but it is what it is. But the key thing is I've assembled a team of experts with me today to bring together the various views that we all have so that you as a delegate, as an attendee can, I guess, take each person's different opinions and views and then implement that based upon your practice. So I'm very lucky and very fortunate to have all these gentlemen in my attendance today. So first of all, and I like doing it in alphabetical order rather than visual order. And we've got Blair from DKO. We've got Brendan Reid, and I keep saying Reidefine. I'll get it right one day. Eugenio and Jorge, and they're both from Enzyme. So welcome to all of you today. So
excellent.
The key thing, I guess, is that we don't want to spend all day with me talking. The whole reason for having these gentlemen along is to get their experiences. So first of all, starting off with you, Blair, just want to give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and I guess your practice and its experience with templates.
So Blair Coward, I'm the official title is Senior Associate Technology, so I look after all the IT and BIM for DKO. We are somewhat a global company, mostly Australasia, office in Vietnam, just under 200 people. So my job is basically to make sure the engine's running across there. We do a lot of work across everything from housing to multi-storey high-rise to student accommodation. I think anything with a bed in it is probably the easiest way to put it. And we do a lot of work between our offices. We share the workload pretty evenly across all places we work.
Thanks a lot for that, Blair. Now, Brendan, you've got an interesting experience. I think not just talking about your consultancy that you're in part of now, I think where people gain a great understanding of your expertise and experience would be probably to not just touch on what you're doing currently, but also kind of your history over the last decade.
Yes, thanks, Nathan. I suppose I've worked in multiple roles, capacities across various countries over the last 30 years or so. So, I've been working in architecture since 1990 in New Zealand, and sort of got my first taste of AutoCAD in 1993, I think it was. And then Archicad was 1995. So I've been using Archicad for a long time. And I was obviously over the years, I had this real affinity for Archicad and thought that there was a lot of value in it for business. Probably I think it might have been about 8-9 years ago, I moved to HDR here in Sydney, who was at the time Rice Dorney, and Rice Dorney did particularly large projects, hospitals and so on. So we had a real sort of initiative to drive BIM from an architectural perspective because there's a lot of value for us. It wasn't driven by the project itself, by the project team. It was actually driven by us, the architects. And there was a lot of value and a lot of profit made in our business because of it. After that, I then went to work for Australia's largest contractor, which was an interesting experience for me for a couple of years. There's a real value of data in the construction industry, and I see that something that I think architects need to learn. That there's if you can curate the information that contractors want, there's a lot of value for you, a lot of benefit for you. And then the last couple of years, I've been working on my own, going out to practice and updating templates and creating, doing audits and creating library objects and so on for people. So yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
So we're moving on from two gentlemen that have worked in substantially large practices, and still working, Blair, I guess, to two gentlemen that are, a micro practice, I call it. But I think that it doesn't discount the fact that as a micro practice, some of the projects you've been working across on the whole globe have been enormous. So I don't know who to start off with first, but Eugenio, Jorge, who would like to start off introducing yourself? Alphabetical order?
Sure. Okay, that means me. My name goes first, but not the surname. Surname will be George. Anyway, no, I can go ahead. Yes. Anyway, thank you, Nathan. I think, of course, they say thing of the micro practice. Well, first of all, me and George, we started Enzyme a bit more than 5 years ago. I think already 6 years ago.
6 years already, yeah.
6 years already. Yeah. And it feels like a two lifetime already because, managing a small company, it's hard because at the end you are a orchestra person that you need to handle everything, right? But the idea was why we started Enzyme is because we wanted to do, good quality design. We are mostly architecture designers that we want to do, great quality architecture, with implementing all the values, of workflows like BIM. But nowadays, I think it's more comfortable to talk about design and BIM. But 5 years ago, it was like, well, you're a designer, you cannot talk about BIM because BIM is for BIM people. And we still see that there is this kind of dual, double team that even in some big corporates, we have seen that these teams even don't go along very well. So we wanted to prove how good design can be achieved with BIM and can really even, all the projects can benefit from having good designers, good design and creativity mindset, but also have a proper workflow. So, that's, after starting Enzyme, of course, we've done a really great deal of different type of works, different type of projects from interior to architecture, medium scale, master planning, very large mixed-use developments. And it's a challenge, but I think it's really relevant for this topic of the template to be able to do different type of projects.
Yeah. And I think just to add on to what Eugenio has said, like we've both of us, we've worked in international practices before and like really good designers in Hong Kong and back in the UK as well. And like we were super glad of being part of those teams, but we were like surprised of how inefficient their workflows were. And, we were like we won't say names, but we were trying to bring all these, BIM workflows and more smart workflows and different way to work. And, and they were just like comfortable in the way that they were, working using AutoCAD 2D. And Eugenio and I we were at the same time doing competitions, in our free time in the kitchen. And we were like, okay, so the project we're doing in the office, we can do it in a couple of weekends together in the kitchen using Archicad and using these workflows, and we couldn't understand. So that's why we started the company. And I think as Eugenio said, it's really relevant for this template discussion because we are all the time hearing like, okay, should you have your template like cater and customize for one type of project? We have this problem in the office where our projects vary so much from one to another that our template it's either like too general or too detailed for many things. So we're all the time trying to balance these two sort of like sides. So anyway, happy to be here.
No, well, it sets us up brilliantly for my first question for you all, and I guess as we've just seen, everyone in the room is coming from different practice background now. I guess arguably most people, it's international, big, large firms and highly regarded. Now, the key thing being a part of this conversation is everyone's out there delivering different projects. These projects are being delivered using different procurement methodologies. So different procurement typically changes the deliverables. And the key focus, I guess, that with all of this is that a template needs to focus on the deliverable that you have specifically as a practice and achieving the most efficient and effective and risk-free way of getting there and taking into consideration all of the road bumps along the way. So apart from that big intro, what are the fundamental elements to your template, Blair, and why is it so important?
So, I think for us, we pull our work a lot. So although we're primarily Australian-based, we've got an office in New Zealand and Ho Chi Minh. The key thing that we've found is having consistency. So we have a core template we start with. The basics in that template are the same for every template across DKO. So all our attributes, our basic workflows, even down to fairly generalised list, like drawing lists and things. Once again, it's output driven. So we basically have sort of a master list of all the things that we are required to produce, and we work backwards from that. But the big thing we find is that we can put any of our staff members on a job, and there's no, other than the project-based training, there's no specific retraining to familiarise themselves with a completely different template. And we find that makes us quite agile, and that we can resource our staff on and off projects and balance our workload across the offices. We found that's been really important for us to align there. Not only that, aligning ourselves with an output as a brand, that you want a drawing set that comes out of the Auckland office versus the Brisbane office. We want them to look the same. We want them to feel like they're coming from the same company, and obviously the content's going to be different. The look and feel should be the same. Sydney to Melbourne, you've got different requirements for town planning, etc. But I think the fundamentals around the core of the template is always the same, even if it's a commercial or an interiors or a housing, because we divide them up by sector and also by office. And the workflows, we try and work through what is the best workflow for 80% of the cases, and we put those workflows into the template. We can then centralise our training as well, so that when we deliver a training module to all our staff, we know that when they then get into a file and start implementing that, it works the same in each project. Obviously, we've got various iterations of templates across different versions, but the fundamentals should all be the same, as we don't end up with that time lag where you put a new team onto a project and they have to relearn the workflows that are embedded in that project. It should be the same across the board.
Now, Brendan, I don't want to talk to you about the past, because there was a lot of energy and effort in the Rice Daubney workflows that I reckon could be a session in itself in terms of learning from the past. But let's talk about now in your consulting role. So when you first walk into a practice and investigate a template, what's the first thing that you're looking for that is the quick fix to make things easier?
Quick fix.
Well, not everything's not a quick fix, but what's the thing the thing is, every single practice, what's the fundamental thing that you need to see, that you want to see in a template to help a business go along, no matter what the template is, or no matter what the deliverables are?
Oh, yeah, Blair touched all those really key points, things that I would look for. I'm looking for consistency, and I want to make sure that, when I look at a project, I don't look at one project, I don't look at one template. When I go into an organization, I look across a couple, because for me, I want to understand, is this business being consistent in the way they deliver their projects? So for me, always looking for consistency. And if there's no consistency, then I look at, okay, well, what's driving that lack of consistency? And it's more often than not, the template doesn't have much in it, and I think there's something really lacking across the industry here, is that the templates are, from what I've seen, they are old Archicad templates that are saved as new versions. They're not taking advantage of new features. These are things I look for. I think, having layouts, having views and layouts predefined, already set up, ready to go, so you don't need to think about it. That's a really key one. I think if you can have embedded information inside elements that are then saved as favorites, once again, you've got a huge advantage. I mean, they're kind of key things that I really look for. What else? I think really, if you can embed information into elements and tag them, you're halfway there.
The main start.
Yeah.
Now, Eugenia and Jorge, your practice is unique, okay, compared to a lot of other practices in the sense that you don't only just deliver projects for your own company, you do a lot of collaborations and you do a lot of work with people across the globe. And you did touch on it lightly when on the introduction about how you're wanting to try and work effectively with people. What's the fundamentals to your template when you possibly will be working diversely with every customer or client you may or collaborator that you work with?
Okay, so how can I? Yeah, just to keep it simple. Yeah,
the Enzyme twist,
okay.
We should just call you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a few elements I think that the guys before, Blair and Brandon explained very well. I think, for example, for us, as we were saying, because we do very different type of projects, so sometimes it's very confusing to give answer to those projects with one template, right? Even there was a big conversation. So we have one template or several templates. The conclusion is to have one template that simplifies everyone's life. And for example, one thing that for me is quite keen is the favorites. It's very simple, but the favorites, also when you evaluate somebody else's template, you can learn a lot about the projects they do by just saying what they have in the favorites, what they need to present, how detailed are the favorites, or how they are organized. In our case, I always say, and even here internally in our small team, we have a lot of discussions. Like I go and I say, I want to have little amount of favorites, very, very simple, that allow me to go quick into a concept stage, because often we do a lot of concept stage projects that start from the beginning that they don't get even built. Only 10% will move forward. But it's good to have a set of favorites that gives answer to, start modeling something that already goes well into documentation for various scales, that has a lot of data that is useful, as Brenda was saying. We end up having also sometimes a lot of data that is just noise. That is that even by default, Archicad templates by default have a lot of settings, out of properties that then you are like, okay, you leave them there, but then they can create a lot of noise when you develop the project. So I think that the favorites and also all the project map, how the view map is organized. So when you're modeling something, you can quick go from the views to the documentation, and you have easily a set of documents. You can easily share, you can easily export deliverables. So for me, that's something that if it's in place properly, and again, it's a challenge for us to have it right, because every project has these different scales. But this is something that will really save you a lot of time, having these things.
Yeah. And just to add to what Eugenio is saying, for us, I think the word that should come in when you're talking about templates is consistency. I really like that one, no? And for us, is quite. I think it would be the same for many companies, but for us is quite challenging, because we're a small company, but we are like scattered around the world. So we have 2 people in Madrid and 1 in Ho Chi Minh, and we collaborate, as you said, with a lot of people that are also not part of our company. And sometimes, they're joining our team, or sometimes we're joining their team. So we need to be consistent the way, we deliver the projects, the way we model, the way also the information is shared, or the amount of information, right? So we've also, and we've spent a lot of time developing Q&A processes. So quality assurance and quality control processes in our template. So whether they are like schedules, for example, to control that every element is in the right layers. We haven't talked about, but layers is something that we have been, putting a lot of effort into distilling and, kind of like cutting down, bringing the layers that we needed. We have, I think, more layers than other, Archicad templates that you see around, but we use them in a quite organized and structured way. So everything needs to be in the correct layer. Everything needs to be classified. Everything needs to have like, ABC, the data inside. So of course, the favorite work, as Eugenio was saying, but we have these, quality control schedules that control like these different things, types, Archicad types against layers, against classifications, whether we have one or more than one classification. The other thing, and also some graphic overrides as well that are helping into this. We're trying to also develop, and this is maybe something that expands, I think it's related to the template, but maybe not directly, but now with the new Python API, we're trying to see how can we develop like this Q&A and QC processes in a little bit more smart way, maybe like bringing, for example, analysis on how things are modeled, whether like maybe like walls are touching correctly. I don't know, like, you know, whether sometimes even like you're trying to do like perpendicular walls and you know, the person is not hitting correctly shift or they're not looking and paying attention and they're like maybe 0.1 degrees deviated, things like this that, you know, are bringing mistakes into the project. We're trying to, you know, create processes within the template that can eliminate those. The other thing that we're doing that I found it quite interesting in the last year is, as Eugenio was saying, we are working in so many different type of projects and all over the world. So we didn't have like like projects and phases that repeated in every project, but we're trying to take some sort of standard and apply them for our own practice. So we took the British Uniclass and our RIBA system. So we're trying to embed all that, you know, the working plan, the RIBA working plan and the Uniclass. And we're trying to, at least for our own, you know, internal workflows, just stick to that, you know. So we have the deliverables are set, the layouts are set. And then if we need to modify that, at least there's a system that we can base on, and then we can modify to something else. You know what I mean? But we're trying to, so we're migrating our template. It's, you know, the whole last year, it's been, you know, finding time to slowly move into this, and we're still working on that. But I think I found that something, you know, like that gives us structure.
Yeah. My fundamental, I think, is attributes and getting them right. Because to me, that's the one controllable piece of information that lives within Archicad, whereas there's a lot of other properties that have the ability to be unlinked. Now, Blair, going back to you, mate, I want to ask you, and this is kind of a quick fire question round, I guess I could call it. If you were to open up a template, what's the first thing that you think could save a couple of hours on each project? If someone were to sit down after this session today, open up their template, what would be the one thing that you get them to do that might take them a couple of hours, but then will save them a few hours on every single project?
Was it to me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just missed that with too much chatter in the background. I think first and foremost, the same views. We've got like a skeleton file. So if you can have it where you can put a person in front of a computer and say, you can start drawing now, and then assuming they're following the right workflows and things, content starts appearing on the layout and you've got a PDF publishing set, you can very quickly assess where things are going. It becomes a very quick process, especially on like a multi-story building and things. If you go in and basically, can you set these up, get them going, and that way you can start forming a team at that point, and you can have people in there working and actively creating outputs pretty quickly. With that, I think the favourites absolutely, if you haven't already got them set up, favourite all the key things that you want to do. If you're doing an apartment block, your core walls, doors, stairs, all those easy kind of building block items, and then you can bring somebody into the team and say, don't do anything except these 10 favourites and do that for the next week and we're gold. And I think that really you can point people in the right direction, and people don't need to go, oh, I'm not sure what this party wall should be constructed out of. I'll go and get the CSR red book and invent something myself. If you can direct them down the channel and say, there's a party wall in there already, just use that unless you find an error or a columns in it or whatever. And it just saves 10 people all doing the same work over and over.
So you're talking about saving time. Brendan, what's the one thing that you think? And I know based upon your last comment, you'll probably say views as well. And it seems like we're a panel that 100% agrees, but
terrible.
Yeah, I mean, they're no-brainers for me. They're tick boxes. And I'll reiterate that. I think it's incredibly important to have those things in place. But I think also you need to also consider, and this is probably not a quick thing to do, but I think consideration needs to be given for naming conventions across a project. And, you know, I think Jorge was talking about, you know, sort of classification system or a categorization system of some kind that you use as a fundamental sort of structure for anything. I think you need to really consider that. You know, if you've got 1,000 favorites, yes, there's a folder structure in there, and yes, you can search. But if you're going to create a new one, where does it go? How does it named? Those sorts of things are really important. And I think the same for your attributes, like you're talking about, just, you know, how are they sorted and organized? So that's, I think any sort of organizational structure is really important. So, you know, it could be a layout, view naming, could be any of those things. Really, really think about those things. But I think another thing that I think it's lost a lot is like a landing page. You know, having a landing page inside a file that when the file is opened by a new user, they know what the project is about. You know, they know when they open that page, it's a multi-story building. They know that, you know, there's an iceberg method for filing modules. You know, there's enough information there to get paint a picture of what the file is. Something like that it's a really simple thing to do, but it's just, you know, I think people spend a lot of time trying to understand a project. And if you can put that on a page for them, I think there's value in that as well.
Well, Brendan, before I pass on to the guys from Enzyme, one of the things I also want to do is for some of the users that don't have any understanding of some of the terminology, what's the iceberg method? And I know we're kind of diverging, but let's kind of, there probably be a number of users that have not worked on large projects that have needed to use modules or had to use, why would you put things on certain stories? Let's just give a quick overview of what an iceberg method and hot link module is.
A quick overview.
Well, I know,
so
but,
I might talk about this a little bit later.
Yeah. So very, very quickly, in a large project, you may have a need to have repeated rooms, repeated apartments, repeated structures, buildings of some kind, rooms of some kind. And they are typically modeled in the lower stories, and then they get linked back in various locations, repeated locations across your project.
And the only reason for doing that?
You only have to model it once.
Correct.
It's used multiple times.
And you'll go, is this a trick question?
Yeah. Well, and the reason to do it within the same file is to avoid problems with attributes and so on. So
correct. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, no, there's so many fundamental reasons for doing that in terms of how long it takes to manage attributes. But Eugenio, what's the fundamental for you, mate?
Well, I like what Brendan mentioned about
the things you'd change.
Yeah, well, I mean, Brandon Blair, they said before me most important things, but I think that Brandon said something very important that I forgot, that is part of our debates and our little fights about what to have in the template, which is like, there was a moment that I was saying, guys, instead of having you think these are the best attributes, you think this is necessary, you think this is not, you want to have these layers, you don't want them. I say, let's forget about what we have and let's create the process of how to add new attributes, how to add new libraries, how to add new favorites, how to add new view names, all those internal things. And I think the naming convention, when Brendan, you mentioned it, I thought you were talking about, of course, the naming convention for a project. But internally, it's like, okay, maybe the materials we have are not the best. We know it. Those from Archicad, they suck. But let's do something. How easy should be to create a new one? Because again, our template needs to be flexible. And we collaborate a lot. So I said, why don't we just focus on create how we enhance it? And this is also talking about the BIM manual, or not even a BIM manual, but just like a short introduction page or a few pages on worksheets saying, guys, this is what you have in the template. If you want to create new attributes, graphic overrides, there's a lot of things that then you open a file and you know, in a team of 10 people, you get lost. You're like, guys, how is this possible that I work next to you? The moment that I'm 3 days without working this project, I open it and I'm lost how to name things, right? Or how to find different attributes or different settings. So I think that's very important. Is also maybe something not inside the template, because of course you guys said it, favorites, the project map, the view map, and the layout, something that automate outputs, but also internally, how do you improvise, how you modify things? I think it's really, really important.
Jorge, anything to add?
To be honest, I think everything has been said. If I can say one thing, something that could save people's time, I think it's creating as well 2 or 3 or 4 views for working. So when you're working, create yourself, a couple of, 3D views or even like 2D views with, like a model view option, simplify the model view option, things that, you can like open quickly and go back every time. Because I've seen a lot of my colleagues every time, just going through the layer combinations, going through all the different, just for work. It's not even for output. It's like, so if you're doing something more than once, just save a view, and just keep it there. So, and then have like a little folder with work in progress sort of views.
Can I just add to that, the whole discussion around what you can do in a template? I think really what's missing here is the education piece as well. And I think, you can change something in the template, but unless you educate it, it'll never get used. And we talk about consistency and the importance of consistency. You can have it all you want in the template, but unless you educate that template, it won't be followed. So, although this is a template discussion, I still believe there's a real need to educate people in the use of the template.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing with any implementation, isn't it? It's as much as you have the technology and the process, without the people having the skills to actually use it, it's my analogy of the templates of owning a Ferrari. If someone doesn't know how to drive it, then they'll crash and burn. And before we move on from this, but this is a really interesting thing, because I actually went into a practice before Christmas that actually had no views and no layout saved in the template. And I was just completely shocked. Now there's a line, right? So I do know, and Link Ellis might be on watching at this point in time. I don't know, but Link obviously has a great template that he developed out of the US. But when he in the good old days at Coddy Parker, I think it was a massive template that had substantial number of stories, because Coddy Parker deliver multi-story projects. So Blair, Brendan, this is a question more for you guys, because I know it's something you work on quite frequently. How many stories are in your templates? Brendan, how about you first, mate? How many stories are pre-saved in your template?
That's a great question. It all depends on the practice I'm doing work for,
Right, let's go back in the Rice Daubney days. How many stories were in it? How many stories were in the template?
How many stories? Rice Daubney days. I think also Rice Daubney template was quite old now. It's probably 7 or 8 years old. But I think there was probably 4, 5.
Yeah, so it was only a small one. So Blair, with all of the multi-story projects you do.
Yep. Core template's pretty low key. It's probably got about 5 up and 10 down. However, if you got into our housing typology one, it's probably around about anywhere between 400 and 600. There's reasons for that. But the standard commercial template that we use generally starts off with only about 4 or 5 positive stories. And then it's got some negative stories. It's got some template content and bits and pieces under there. It doesn't have a lot. And I've got to say, we've changed our thinking, but we've gone up and down. The housing typology template's it's stacked. It's very, very tall, and deliberately so. It's just the nature of the projects we work on. When you're doing a 400 lot housing subdivision, the amount of housing typologies you need to create, and the amount of time it will take somebody to create all those stories. If we do it once in the template, even if they only use a third of them, it's still going to save them a lot, because it's all views, module outputs and things, all types of that. And it's probably better for us as a BIM team to put that together and start having to create all those things and have somebody use it to a third, rather than them on every project stacking up hundreds of stories themselves on project time, earning fees.
So we'll talk about Brendan's method of the iceberg, but we'll talk about your method as being Everest. That might be the answer, right? All right. So we're on to our last question, and then I guess we'll hopefully have a few minutes, I guess, to kind of debate things, I guess. But in some of the templates that you've been able to observe throughout your career, what are some of the mistakes or traps that you've seen people make that they fundamentally possibly shouldn't have done in their template? And I'm going to go back the other way this time. Paul, hey, your first time, mate. You can go first now, because then everyone's not going to say everything this time. You can actually have something to say.
Okay. So I won't say everything. So, I leave some room for the other guys. Okay. So I think maybe going from the most complicated stuff is like I've seen a lot of people getting stuck in collaboration. So for example, IFC translators, DWG translators, like they, okay, you can model, you can do your stuff more or less efficient, but when they get into the, the IFC and the data and so on, they get lost. Like, just having like a basic IFC type mapping from, or just using the Archicad classification, right? So just having that built onto the template, because otherwise, that's going to be a big crash for whoever needs to take care of that. So I think for me, yeah.
So that's the apply attributes or classifications before you model.
Yeah.
Because the time to take to fix it after it's modeled is exponential.
Yeah. And having like a basic, idea on logic on what are you going to be your like exports. So are you going to export IFC, DWG, PDF, and, try to, build perhaps like a few translators and also the publisher in order to, to have that information quickly and efficiently and consistent every time.
All right, Eugenia, your turn, mate.
Yeah, no, George is right. This we forgot to mention about the connection of Archicad outside Archicad. We always talk as if Archicad can do everything, but when you connect with Enscape or Twinmotion or Lumion, this fast rendering engines, I think it's quite important. I mean, but at least for us, we use it a lot, and we need to work on that connection, and also on the IFC side, collaborating. I think these things you need to have them ready, because the moment comes, you need to collaborate with someone, and then you're stuck. But for example, for me, I like to when I look at the template, our own template, or somebody else or another company, when I see too many things, like too many attributes or too many graphical rights, too many of anything, I start asking, okay, why is this? I think that, as Brandon was saying, unless when you ask that question, somebody comes with a super strong naming convention logic that makes you understand that you're not going to get lost. So everything has a reason to be there. And then you say, okay, you have it figured out. Otherwise, I would say, try to have, the basic to start. Of course, if you always do the same type of projects, probably you have that logic, you have that consistency, and look, we always end up using all these type of products. But at the end, I don't think you need too many things. I think you need to have that consistency that we were talking before, and more than that, as I was saying, I once opened a template that one stage one of our guys had input a huge amount of super beautiful textures and surfaces, and I said, wow, that's amazing. Then we have this solved. We will never have to do it again. And after using the template for a project, the second day, I had to create a new surface that wasn't there. And I was like, okay, then again, I need to be able to create in a way that everyone understands, rather than have the most beautiful billions of materials, right? So I think for me, it's a bit of that. Don't have too many of everything. If you have it, have consistency and have that plan that Brendan was saying, like being able to modify it.
All right, Brendan, you're up, mate. What's the one of the worst things you've seen in a template?
I think a really common mistake with templates that I see quite a bit is where people take all the attributes, delete them, and start again. I think it's a big no-no. I wouldn't dare do that. All the library objects are, all pre-configured to various pen colors and lines and
fills.
It just fills. Yeah, it's a headache. I wouldn't delete any existing attributes. I would always build new attributes after those ones, and maybe you can structure your naming so they can be separated in the dialogue. So that's one that I've seen. I see a lot, and I would recommend against doing. And I think the second one is just as a practice, understanding exactly what your outputs are and building your template to meet those outputs. It sounds simple, but, I think it's just, I don't really see that enough. There hasn't really been enough thought that's gone into the template. So you just need to think about, okay, so my RCP, is it going to come from a 3D document? Is it going to come from a working 2D window plan view? Is it going to be a hybrid of the two? Just really thinking about each of those workflows and how, and those outputs and how the template is going to talk to those. And they're probably my two big ones.
No, you could have told me that 12 years ago when I did that the first time. Did not delete all the attributes out. It was a pain back in Archicad 9 when I decided to do that. But I've learned since then. And, I've created over 3,000 attributes at Fulton Trotter.
Wow.
No, but the positive is it ties to a specification. So there is a logic behind it. So Blair, on to you, mate. I've made fatal mistakes in my career. What's yours?
I'd like to say not me personally. I think that the thing, especially people who are quite nerdy by nature, creating really complicated systems that break easily, things that aren't clear, you've got hidden workflows. If you put somebody into a file like that and there's all sorts of you've got to put the special code in a zone, which is then embedded in a module. And if it's not apparent, people will go around and they'll break that and all your schedules will fall to pieces and things like that. And I think trying to overcomplicate things. I think the other one and I think Brendan, you raised earlier, don't just open Archicad 9 and save it as 10 template and 11 and 12 and things, because I've seen some pretty awful examples of classifications from Noah's Ark back in there, and people just completely miss all the new features that have come out. That you're crippling yourself if you're not actually taking a fairly clean slate approach to that, notwithstanding not deleting everything out of the project and starting again, obviously. But I think those two...
That's a point in itself. That is a point in itself.
Yes, it is. And we find that when we go from version to version, we try not to create everything new from scratch. It's obviously it's in a new version, but to basically have somebody working on, say, a 21 project, they move to a 24 project, they don't want to then suddenly have to learn an entirely new template. Our ones generally are incremental updates. We haven't reinvented the wheel on every version. So, and we quite regularly get people who work 1 week on a 21 project and somebody's working on a 24 project the next week, because we don't always roll our files up, especially when you've got ridiculously large files. We tend to hold them in the version that they're drawn in, especially if they're kind of in construction mode.
Yeah. And that might be migration libraries. Seeing in the template.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing that I was thinking while you guys, Eugenia and Brandon were talking, is something that I've seen as well is the misuse of graphic overrides and the pens and colors. So people trying to go against the logic of Archicad of the pens and colors. You know what I mean? Like building up, so pens and colors works in columns, right? Like they're related to the different elements. So people trying to work out different system and having to go to each of the, objects and tools to change that. That was something that for us, it took a bit of, when we started using Archicad, we didn't know about this. So we create our own, pens. Mm-hmm. And after the years, we said, okay, that's not how you're supposed to work. and I don't think that's, maybe said out loud or advertised enough from
no one tells you that.
No one tells you that.
It was stop fighting it.
Yeah. So stop fighting that. The other thing that for me has become like a revelation is when graphic overrides came out, they were like magical. So you could do anything with graphic overrides, and you don't need like the pens anymore. You can change things and so on. But we started creating too many graphic overrides to do too many things. And at some points they were like everywhere, and it was no way we could know which one was doing what. So what we're starting discussing internally is like, we probably want to use graphic overrides always, as this is in our office, to simplify rather to give more detail. So we try to, so you model with a lot of detail and you use graphic override to take detail out of your, in a sense, so you eliminate layers of the walls, composites or whatever, to make it look more diagrammatic in that sense, right? And that works very well, rather than trying to use it to, build up detail using graphic overrides, because that you have to create so many rules and so many different complicated systems that break, and going back to what Blair said, and I think that was also two things that I think are very common mistakes too.
I'm in trouble with all these today. I've changed all my pens as well, but there's a lot of R&D that went into changing my pens, because I know where there are hidden hard-coded pens for lamps, for example, that people miss.
Yeah.
So if you're going to embark on any of these crazy things, you have to be kind of very rigid in your ways, naming conventions and the like. But I guess what we'll do is close out with a bit of a conclusion before we move on to questions from the attendees. But I guess the fundamental thing to take away from the experience we have here, and I haven't even calculated the number of years that we have in Archicad user experience. Brendan's almost been using Archicad since I've been born. But the key thing, I guess, is that we first of all talked about views and having views in place. We talked about having layout sheets in place. We've talked about having attributes, but tying even more back to, if you have all of these things in place, it can be overly complicated if you don't actually have naming conventions. If you don't have naming conventions for things to tie it all back together, I think from my perspective, they would be the kind of first things, apart from favorites, that seem to tie everything together in terms of what you need to do to start. And without having those kind of fundamental things in place, you're not saving the time you can save exponentially on each project that you do each year within your practice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now what we'll do is we'll cut over to the question and answers with the audience. So thanks a lot, gentlemen. Welcome to the question and answers on our template for session 3. For those that are new, that haven't heard us talk before regarding the chat, if you haven't figured out how to log onto the chat, all you just need to do is click onto the chat box and where it says to join and sign in, and just put in your name details. It's just a safety net that's been put in place by Vimeo. It doesn't collect any data. You're not signing up for anything, but it's just there in place for that purpose. Thank you very much to the people that made comments about the audio problems in our last Q&A. We've looked to address that and removing some noise compressors and the like from the audio. So hopefully the audio, now you might hear a bit more background noise, but at least we're not going to be hopefully cutting out. Now, for those that haven't put any questions in the comments, in the chat, please do now. We do have a couple of questions or comments. Matthew Johnson's talking about a noise to signal ratio. That sounds like as if he's in telegraph section. Is critical in any project. The template includes everything that users need often. Drowns them down too many choices. So obviously sometimes having everything available is a problem. I'm assuming you guys would think the same. And he has a process where he uses 2 files, one that has all the settings and he's a second file that contains all the properties. What are your thoughts on that, guys, overall? Who wants to have a comment about the use of data? Maybe we have a hands up system with so many of us. No one? Blair, you're in a big practice right now. How do you handle all the data?
I think in regards to that comment, yes, you've got to have I don't know, and you've mentioned this in your talks in the past as well, that derivative approach where you start large and then you cull it down to what you need for that particular template. So if it's doing a townhouse or something, you certainly don't need all your master planning zones and layers and bits and pieces, but you've got to account for them to start with. So fairly similar, I suppose our core is quite comprehensive, and then we'll cull bits out of it to get it down to something a little bit finer, so you're not scrolling through 300 layers to get to the one you want.
Yep. So Jorge and Eugenio, you're obviously a smaller size practice, but you're contributing and working with large organisations. What's your approach?
We have everything in our template, no?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we have everything, but I think Eugenio, well, I think he pointed before. I think there is one approach that we have, that is, we have everything that we think that it's necessary for most of the project, and then we try to have in place a strategy to grow the template as it goes, like, naming conventions and rules for growing the data and the attributes inside the template. So it's a balance for us, I think. I don't know, Eugenio, if you have any.
Yeah, I was about to say that for us, every project is really radically different. And sometimes we have to improvise more than we want during the project. So we really want to have more in place the process of how to, respond to different requirements. So, in every project, really, we suddenly have to provide data in different formats or organized in a different way. And then we need to say, okay, how do we usually do that? How we adapt this quickly? Because it's impossible to be ready for every single type of project. So the process in place, like the protocol of how to do that is quite important for us.
Yep. Now, Brendan, from your perspective, you've come from major practice and $2 billion hospitals. Thoughts on it in terms of the template and how it fundamentally sets up the basis, and how much do you have in a main template file?
Historically, we had everything in the file. Yeah. I mean, I'm a little bit fearful of the two-file method personally, just because you're dealing with attributes and you're relying on people to move them appropriately, which can be educated. There's no question. But it just scares me when people start moving attributes across. I'd rather have a file with everything in it and strip it out. But, that's all part of the debate, isn't it?
No, well, I ran a two-file system because we had over 3,000 building materials, and there's no way you'd put that in a main file. But
wow,
that was because it was specification linked, and it was to control the needs of 10 different directors and wanting to do things in particular ways. So you've got to do that. Oh, no, it's just diversity. It's about trying to meet all the needs of all the stakeholders, essentially. Damien talks about using his master file as a core attribute control file, which does make sense, and uses additional files for stages, typology, interior files, layout books, secondary to the master. Layout books, we could talk about the concepts of layout books and how many people are still using PMKs. Blair, are you a PMK man, or are you live hot linking?
It depends on the project, but definitely all our large-scale housing, like 1,100 houses and things, we've found having a layout book and not trying to store all of that in the master file is pretty much the only way to go once you get to that file size.
And that's something we'll probably talk about later. Brendan, you're a PMK man?
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
I am a PMK man for the larger projects. Yeah, the layout book contributes too much in the database. If you can get that out, separate it, then PMKs are the way to go. Yeah. And with BIM Cloud now, if you pay for the BIM Cloud Pro, if you want to call it that, for a better term,
Enterprise,
that workflow is even better.
Yeah. You guys, Jorge, is that something you guys are working on, anything that big yet that you're playing in that sphere where you're running multiple files to do that?
Yeah, we do. We're not, actually, I'm not so familiar with the PMK workflow. I think we've used it once or twice, where mostly we're using hot links, right? Like we've separated our layout book several times, especially in big projects, but I don't remember using PMK, Eugenio.
PMK workflows before you guys were born, right? Trust me. It's a workflow.
Seems that still is good. I mean,
it's a workflow from Archicad 8, I believe, isn't it, Brendan? I think it is.
What was that?
Archicad 8 workflow team.
Maybe even 7.
7, yeah.
Anyway, much earlier.
No, but the thing is it's actually still the most reliable methodology in terms of quickness of actually. It's actually a lot quicker getting information out. We're getting distracted.
Plotmaker was free. You didn't need a license to run that. You had free desktop publishing.
That's true.
This is a good question, and this is a contentious one. I like Paul's question about pen sets. So this is probably more of a question directed to you, Brendan, because at the moment you're assisting people with template creation when you're consulting with them. If you're developing a template for a region, do you use the standard regions pen set, or do you create your own custom one?
I've always tried to keep to the region specific. Well, actually, is it the international specific? In fact, the Archicad specific is what I try to keep it stuck to as best I can. I think it's the great. I mean, although having said that, that's my methodology now. That's what I believe is the right way to go. But at the large practice that we were talking about previously, we only used to use the first 10 pens. They were the rotring pens of old, back in the day when you used ink pens. And we just used pens 1 to 10 pretty much, and that was it. Yeah. So but my thought has changed on that. I think the way they come out of the box is actually a better approach. And the fact that all the objects are connected inherently to those things are represented properly.
Maybe I'll do a presentation one day on my ideas on pen sets, because it did require a lot of research. I personally am not the person that conducted it. There was one of the young people who's now a registered architect at Fulton Trotter, did all the research for us in terms of identifying, hard-coded pen sets or pens, and then we're able to adjust it to suit, and it actually creates a really beautiful outcome. Daniel Sagerman. Daniel Sagerman's one of our sponsors today with Mac Interact, and he's actually got a special on, I think, during our event, 20% off. So make sure you go over to the Mac Interact page to have a look at that. But he does raise a good point, guys, in terms of developing your template and adjusting it as you go, because it's going to be always a live working document. It's never ever going to be complete.
Like I said in my presentation earlier, a template is not save as the latest version of Archicad. That's you must update it. Absolutely.
Blair, how often do you perform template reviews at DKO?
Ongoing. Just an example, our 21 and lots of projects are still, because they're quite long-winded, and 21, and that's revision 7.1 at the moment of that template. So it's the key for us is probably trying to keep all the fundamentals about the same, because if we have any transfer of project data from one to another, we've got to be careful that we're not mucking up the attributes with that. It's very much, it's incremental changes. There's bits and pieces, we'll add things, and as we go, we'll discover things and go, okay, well, that's really not working. Or there's a team of we have to put these extra layers in every project. Why they're not on the template, which is the right question to ask.
Yeah. Now, there's a question from John regarding some good basic advice on starting naming conventions. Who wants to have a talk about naming conventions? I know naming conventions is something that I live by, and basically matching attributes across building material surfaces, cut fills and cover fills. And they're basically tied to generic specific naming of real life materials and products. How do you guys go about your naming conventions?
I'll just jump in with a really basic thing that we use across all our attributes and things is the type and subtype. So if you've got 3 brick materials, or you've got some annotation layers of things, it's always the type first and subtype. So you might have annotate general or annotate reflect. So they're clumped together rather than having to scan through lists of stuff. And we use plain English on pretty much all our attributes.
Yeah. No short, what do you call it? Short-term words.
You don't use numbers? No.
Now we're getting close to running out of time, gents. So all the questions that people have, I'm happy for you to guys keep coming through with the questions. What we will do is I'll encourage the whole panel to jump online onto the chat and start responding to those questions throughout the ad break. There are a lot of good questions there. Maybe one last one, I think, which is really important maybe to talk about is from Damien, and this is actually probably a good one for you guys for Hawaii and Eugenio. With all the different work you're doing, how do you deal with favourites?
Don't have them yet? That's our favorite topic. No, I think the favorites, we have been really betting on them strong the last 2 years, because when you start working, it's really makes everyone in the team very aligned. So it's just start with a favorite, then you can adapt, because of course you cannot have a favorite for everything. But in this way, everyone starts working and building building in the project in the same way. But also during the process, if at some point you want to change some elements and you want to change not only the dimensions, but also some set of data, you can select a few elements and adapt to one favorite using one of the elements settings transfer. So, you can select that to say, okay, this is going to follow this favorite, but only at this level of information, maybe not the geometry, but the data, sometimes just the geometry, but you don't change the data. So in that sense, they really allow you to keep the project, very well organized.
Yeah. I think something we've done in the last year or so is organizing a file of favorites, and we started putting it in a hot link file first. And then we, in our template now, we have like a one story specifically designed to host that hot link file. So everybody, when we start a project, they can, hot link the favorite file and start picking from there. So we have like this master story with everything that we have with visual favorites. I think we copied that from someone.
All right, guys, we have gone over time, and I want to try and keep everything on time today. So thank you very much for participating today. There'll be a couple more presentations from a few of you later today as we go through. But now we need to move on to session 4. There's no ad break. Sorry, you can't leave to go to the toilet. But for anyone that wants to continue in the comments, we will respond to those as we move on to the next session. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much for contributing.
Thank you, guys.
Helping make this event successful.
Thanks, everyone.
All good. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah.